Πολώνω ως παπάς στο ίδιο τρένο με τους Εβραίους προς το Αουσβιτς.
Ο μετέπειτα τραπεζίτης του Γκορμπατσόβ σώζει παπά στο Αουσβιτς.
The camera is showing your arm. Would you tell me your number again, please?
139.996. 139.996. Would you like to hear it in SS German? Häftling 139.996. Meldet sich gehorsam. Reports with respect.
When did your family go, or did your family all go together on the train? What date do you remember?
We were in the boxcar. Was my grandmother, two aunts, Uncle Leon, born in 1905, my father, my mother, and myself. Plus, God knows how many, 100 other people.
Were they all Jews? Do you know?
150. In that particular car, surprisingly, astonishingly, there was a Catholic who later on became sort of a project of mine in the camp. But he was not only a Catholic, he was a Jesuit priest who later I found out in Krakow, when one of the bishops said, at least the Germans are cleaning the country of Jews. He turned around and he says, well, Jesus was one. At that point, this is a rumor, this is what I heard, what he told me. They must have, this bishop must have written to his parish where he was born, and lo and behold, one of his grandparents or great-grandparents was indeed Jewish. So they denounced him to the Germans. The Germans put many Jesuits into prisons because they were eliminating the Polish intelligentsia. And he was in jail someplace, maybe in Krakow, maybe someplace else. And was probably taken from that jail and brought to Zawiercie and shipped to Auschwitz. But the train was, except for that one human being, was Jews.
What was his name, the Jesuit priest?
Father Joseph.
Do you know his last name?
I have no idea.
We
called him Joseph.
Did you know him?
Yossel.
Yossel.
Occasionally.
Did you know him before you went in the cars?
No.
When did you meet him?
In the car. He was standing in a corner with a group of Jews who decided to pray. And he stood in a corner and kind of swayed with them. There were 3 days in that damn car. People were dying, most of them were dead. But he crossed himself occasionally, which was astonishing. What is he doing? I think on the second day or third day, he started to talk to the rabbi. Young man, very nice man. And this is how we found out that he was not Jewish, he was a priest. And I stayed with him for 6 weeks in Auschwitz. We maneuvered him to be in a transport to Fünfteischen, where we worked for, I'm going to come to that. So he stayed with me and my uncle till the winter of 43.
All right, so tell some more about, you were on the train 3 days, you said. Did you know where you were going? Did they tell you where you were going?
Through the cracks, people could see the stations. People who traveled the road. There was no doubt about it. where we were going. Of course, we dreamt about resettlement and all this nonsense. We're not going to go to Auschwitz, but we did go to Auschwitz, and the doors opened, and it drove us out and lined us up, and most went to the right, and most went literally to the crematory, and a few of us went to the quarantine camp. There was another incident in connection with Auschwitz. I got to know the man in charge of the reception center by accident. A prisoner, a trustee.
Jew? A Jew?
No, he was a German. And he was Kommando Capo. Trustees had two ranks. Capos were in charge of work details or work sections, and certainly the reception center was a work section for those prisoners who processed us, and people in charge of barracks. So on the one hand you had capos, on the other hand you had Blockältestes, Lagerältestes, man in charge, trustees, prisoners, in charge of the camp. And there were 20 camps in Birkenau. In Gypsy camp, one of them. Man in charge of trustees in barrack, Blockälteste. In charge of every camp, and perhaps every barrack, were SS men. And they was distinguished by the title of Lagerführer, Rapportführer, Scharführer. If you were a Führer, you were not a trustee. The trustees had absolute power. Literally, they could do whatever they wanted to do. They wanted to kill us or save us. In the first few hours in the reception center, the trustees conducted their own selection, sifting out the old and young that were perhaps not that carefully selected in the ramp. And they started to amuse themselves when we were in pain because of the kerosene hurting us, burning us. We're jumping around. This amused them enormously. I'm sure they saw this every day. They found the priest, who was older than all of us, and they started to push him around. And by now, my father knew that he was not a Jew, he was a priest. He said, look what they're doing to him, he's not even Jewish. And at that time, somebody kicked me from behind, also selecting me because probably I was small, and I kind of fell into that circle in front of the priest. I didn't know what to do. So I started to scream in SS language. I said, look at this man. This is not a Jew. Why are you pushing this man around? The way I said it, the way I pronounced, was erlaubst du dich, schau dir doch diesen Mann an, das ist doch kein Jude. It sounded like the SS. And the Kommando Capo came over, grabbed me by the arm, lifted me, he says, what in the world are you doing? What are you allowing yourself? Who in the hell are you? Are you German? I said, no, I am not German, I'm a Jew, but this man, unless you're blind, you can tell he's not a Jew. He said, how come you speak German like this? So I told him I worked for the SS. Went away, talked, said a few words to the priest. And the priest must have told him that I also, well, I think he spoke also Polish to me. He said, what else do you speak? As an afterthought. I said, Russian. He says, Russian? How come? I said, not only do I speak Russian, my father has the command of the language far beyond my capacity. He says, where is he? I said, over there. He said, I may be able to use him. Took me, my father dragged my uncle, the priest, and then the priest got the rabbi from the car, and we sat on the bench while every single one of them was going through the process. We sat on that bench. He says, nobody will bother you here. And then he came over, and we were the last ones to be tattooed. I don't know if my father was 95 or 97. I'm being 96, but I know that the priest was 1,400,000.
This was Father Joseph that you mentioned.
Yes. And indeed, he needed Russian speakers because our barrack had the first transport of Soviet prisoners of war. Soviet prisoners of war were not kept in POW camp. There was no Stalag 17. They were sent to concentration camps. And very few could communicate with them. And yet you had to communicate with them because when the SS man came in the morning to count you at night, you had to know German commands. They were not said in Russian, they were said in German. Häftlinge Stillstand, Mitzenab, Achtung, all that stuff. So my father became an interpreter, and I became an interpreter, and I got to know some of the Russians, and they were also in the transport to Fünfteischen. Other than those events, everything was normal. You know, normal Auschwitz, Birkenau kind of camp.
Was there, in the quarantine camp, why was it called a quarantine camp, by the way?
It was the camp which kind of sifted through selections, kept the best alive, the strongest, not the best, the strongest, the mentally crippled, so that they could be sent to other camps to work.
Was Father Joseph still with you there then?
Yeah, he was with me until the winter of 43 and 44. Well into 44.
So he went with you?
Yes, he went to Fünfteischen.
Who were you close with at Fünfteischen? Your uncle was with you, your father
yes,
didn't?
My uncle was with me until January 6th of 1944.
What happened?
He died.
How did that happen?
Became a Muslim and a skeleton and died. It's an impossible question, a question that has no answer. The question should be, how come some people didn't die? True miracle. Even that is hard to explain. Because most died. A huge percentage died, were killed. We were selected in Auschwitz. We were selected in Fünfteischen. We're the best. I was the youngest. Maybe my uncle was the oldest. In prime life.
Your uncle was how old then when he was?
He was born in 1905 and died in 44.
Was he working on your detail?
No, he was in a different department.
Were you with him in the same barracks or not?
I think so.
And Father Joseph?
He was working in my department.
Tell what happened
at my machine. Well, we tried to save him. And it's an interesting story, but far too long. And eventually, we managed to engage the civilians in trying to save him, and even some of the Germans. But then he got selected. It was a very bitter winter, very cold. They were put in They were stripped naked, taken to the railroad station, put into cattle cars, and shipped off to grow frozen. They must have frozen to death the next few hours. But we tried to save him. We were truly honest. He was a saint. He was a great, great man. Very few people were saintly in the camp. And he was. He touched people in a very peculiar way. But he didn't make it. It wasn't a good place to be a saint. Herzbruck, the camp I escaped from. Behind this only building standing, the Finanzamt, is a sports center. 2 huge swimming pools, tennis court. There's the building where the camp was, there's a sports center. He says, where's the river? I said, wow, who the hell knows what they did with the river? So he said, it's in there. So I walked through the turnstile. This girl says, Entschuldigen Sie bitte. I said, never mind, I'm not going to pay to go into here. Last time I was in Herzbruck, I went in for free. And I walked, and we came to the edge, and there was the river. And he said, wow, there's the river. Was that the last? I think that's the last. No, yeah, I think that's the last time I was in Herzbruck.
What year was that?
A few years ago.
Who was the man that you escaped?
Anton Post was his name. And we escaped. Truly, honestly, made it with tremendous difficulty.
We wanted to, let's continue this on the next tape then, okay? This is tape 8, January 21st, 1998. The survivor is Theodore Lehman. Interviewer Tony Katch-Binstock in Maui, Hawaii, United States of America, and is being done in English. At the end of the last tape, you were saying that you and Anton Post escaped. Would you tell about that, please?
Well, we escaped. And this is 1971. What is it? This is 1998, January 21st. Years later, obviously I survived.
You told your son about the river. Tell me about the river.
Well, there was this river.
Yeah.
He must have planned this thing for a long time. So we went up the river so that the dogs, I guess, didn't think. They didn't find out that we escaped for quite some time because the sirens, we didn't hear the sirens until we were towards the morning. The air raid was maybe 11 o'clock in the evening. And by that time, he planned it well. We walked for 6 weeks. And then he insisted on going home, and he never made it.
Where was his home?
Schwerterruhe.
And where is that located?
It's close to the German-French-Swiss border, and I crossed to France, and the rest is history. And you know I escaped because we are in Maui, Hawaii, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Another beautiful island. I wish I could take this thing. And I'm 71 years old. And that was 44. Who remembers these details?
That was 1940.
But you certainly, what you wanted to know about the camp, I told you.
I just want to get a little bit more information about your escape. And
well, I escaped.
Did anybody hide you during that time?
No, but there was one place where really they helped us with food.
What was that?
Oh, a little farm village. And the woman was plowing.
Did they know you were
She figured it all by it. She was a little tiny woman, Mutti, and she went in. I found out subsequently because I met him later on and fed him right after the war. Went into the house, and she said, there's a little boy up there, and he has to be, ich muss ihn aufpeppern. I got to feed him. And she evidently milked the cow, brought out a bucket of milk and a big round loaf of rye like this of rye bread. And the next day she did it again, and then we moved on.
Do you remember where that was?
Oh, yes.
What was the
Oh,
name?
A little village called Weisling.
Do you remember the woman's
By
name?
Kolbach. Breitner. Wonderful woman.
Last name or first name, Breitner?
I never knew her first name. Was Mutti, always. Mamala. And then I saw her after the war. And very nice woman, very nice family. I knew the family for a long time. That's the way it was in the camp.
So then you you left, or Anton Post left you.
He insisted on going home.
And this was what time of year?
Oh, I don't know. It was warm, so it could have been early fall.
Of 44 or 45?
Or 44.
Fall of 44.
44.
You see, you were
44. Yeah, I think so.
you were in Fufteiten from fall of 43.
It's all in these documents.
Yeah, I just thought for the
20
tape.
months I was in camps, off and on,
So this may
including the camp in Zawielce. I was in a ghetto. I was in a camp. And I survived.
and when you
towards
marched after you left Anton Post,
I
Tell
was
about that.
already in France, and I kind of made myself. It was easy to organize things in France. It wasn't organizing. I just stood in front of a farmer. I wouldn't open my mouth, and they brought me some food, and I moved on, not to
what kind of
get
clothes did you
anybody.
have on?
Oh, civilian clothes by then, yes.
You'd organized some civilian
Oh, I
clothes?
organized civilian clothes. Yes, absolutely.
And then
It was a successful escape.
Then where did you go in France?
I escaped from a lot of places. From academia, from Wall Street.
You're gonna tell about that. in a
Before
minute.
this day is out, I'm going to escape you too.
Okay, we're going to go back to France now. And I'd like you to tell me,
You want to go to Paris or
Where-
Marseille, Lyon?
where
Where,
did you-
where would you like to go?
where did you go after you left Anton Post?
Well, mostly we just walked. I walked along roads, woods, railroad tracks. In Europe, I'm marked every tenth of a kilometer. It tells you the next station. So if you organized a map, you kind of knew where you were going.
And where did you go then? Where did you?
Well, eventually I met American troops, and
Where was that?
I was in France, and they fed me and kept me in a hospital, and they interrogated me, and they were amazed that I could speak German and walk through Germany. And they said, well, maybe you could walk back, and kind of conned me in, and I became an interrogator.
Oh, you're going a little fast. Can we just slow down just a little bit?
Certainly not. We're not going to go on for, what is this, the 8th tape? This is the last tape.
Just fill me in a little bit, okay?
Well, I was obviously a useful addition to the German army. I spoke this great German. I spoke the German like the SS. So when I became an interrogator, I didn't know how to speak to them any other way. So I spoke to them the way they spoke to me. I just substituted one word. When they used Jew, Jude, I put in Deutsche, German.
So how did the United States, did the Army recruit you? Were you,
Well, they found me. They took me to the hospital. They fed me. And since they were always interested in having people infiltrate and find out what's on the other side of the front, and I was a willing participant, I kind of organized myself into the intelligence service. And then after the war, I was in Vienna. I was with the counterintelligence corps, and who were hunting Nazis and turning over papers to Wiesenthal, who continued to hunt Nazis, and there were hundreds of thousands of displaced persons, former concentration camp inmates. And some of them we started to recruit to go home to Palestine after 2,000 years. Let me tell you something remarkable about the Germans. I told you how they failed to use us rationally in the production of cannons. I'll tell you another most amazing thing. Amazing because the nation is so well educated, was so well educated. The greater cause of casualties of German troops on all fronts, in the wastelands of Russia, under Stalingrad, in the desert of North Africa, Al Alamein, was lack of plasma, blood. Now, I told you in detail what they did to us in the camp. Silly people wasting such wonderful labor, treated us less than slaves. Nice man, this Ferenc, wrote a book, gave me credit, lifted it right up from my testimony. Took our hair, shipped it to a factory, and the factory made slippers for submariners so that they were very soft. Sonar couldn't pick him up. Tried to make soap out of us, but there was no fat on us. You can't make soap without fat. Cook the bones was too cumbersome. I don't think they really made soap out of us. You can make soap out of anything. What they really needed, though, is plasma. Blood. Now today, and then we knew that blood was blood. It was A or B plus or minus or O. As a matter of fact, every SS officer under his left arm had a tattoo. Us they tattooed here or here, them they tattooed with the blood type. Now if they only understood that we had the same blood, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, because they would drain us of blood and ship it to the front. But they couldn't do that with Jews. We were inferior. Another waste. Bears are white in Alaska. They're brown lower down. Around Denver, some of them are kind of greenish. Skin them, and the DNA is the same. They didn't take our blood. Not very smart. And of course they lost the war, which was a tremendous loss of face.
Can I go back to a couple?
If you want to. I mean, but you're flying solo now.
Personal things.
For example.
Were you inducted into the Army, or were you part of the Army?
I was part of the Army. I was an interrogator, and in August of 1944, I was one of the first to be in Vienna, where lo and behold, they didn't know that. They knew I spoke German and I was a great interrogator, for I spoke to the Germans like they spoke to me. Sie will doch stramm stehen, was ich anrede, verfluchte Deutsche. It scared him. Only the Gestapo talked like that. He says, wo haben Sie Deutsch gelernt? Where did you learn German? In Auschwitz. I didn't know anything about it. Don't get nervous. I'm just after the information. When I got to Vienna, Vienna was divided into 4 zones. The Russian zone, the French zone, the English zone, and our zone. They found out I could speak Russian. I was a very useful commodity. And they weren't anti-Semitic at all. The Army was very good to me. They brought me up. It's a fantastic Army. They constantly complained about food. I've never seen anything like this. Food that I would kill for, die for. They didn't want to eat. C rations? Nah. K rations? Nah. Unbelievable. Never seen people like that. Donuts and coffee. They would kill for a donut and a coffee and a girl in a Red Cross uniform. And now, I was a Russian interpreter. It was very useful.
Did you get your citizenship at that time?
I got my citizenship. I got everything. I came to America
No, but
with a tremendous complex. I didn't finish grade school. And my mother kept saying, you have to go to school. With my experience at Krupp, I got a job in a machine shop in Wisconsin. I was a very good machinist. And at night, and then during the day, I went to school. And I graduated from college. It was a miracle. 2.5 years. Then I got a master's degree. And where do I go? Back to the Army Language School in Monterey. Not a bad place. Went back to Europe. Was an intelligence officer. Worked with the Russians. Came back, went to the Russian Institute, Columbia University. Escaped from Columbia University into Wall Street. By chance, by accident, I once went to lunch in Wall Street. I had no idea what we were doing. They were sitting and hollering at each other. Megaphones, 7/8s, 15/16s. I got more. Hit my bid. These were my kind of people. Survivors, thieves, smugglers. They had so much fun. So I went to Wall Street. I worked in Wall Street. I quit. During Perestroika, I spent about 8 years in Russia recently. But then I escaped from Russia and came to Hawaii. Not a bad place. I don't know why he doesn't turn around this camera and shows him where we are sitting. Beautiful ocean. Yesterday you and I saw whales, yes? Mama whale, Papa whale, and a little whale. Only in America. Huh, what a country.
I am going to go back and ask you some things that you kind of just...
Solo. Solo. You're taking a solo trip by yourself.
Okay. You did say something about
Stop.
Wiesenthal and about smuggling.
Well, smuggling?
Did you say you were...
In intelligence work, that's all you do. You steal, organize, smuggle, bring back the information. What do you think intelligence officers do? I was well trained for that. To tell you the truth, I'm an excellent organizer.
Did you ever smuggle people?
Oh, no, that's an interesting episode. Yes. We didn't smuggle people. This was with the blessing of the United States government. I took in hundreds of displaced persons into Palestine, then Palestine. And they joined. They had no place to go. The Holocaust did one thing. It proved to us conclusively that this pact we made, that we cannot go back until the Messiah comes, truly, honestly, had unforeseen consequences. And since none of us had any place to go, there was no home. So we decided to preempt the Messiah and went to Palestine. The odds were wonderful. There were only 70 Arabs against one of us. Tremendous. So obviously we helped. We took him in.
Who is we, and would you tell me about that a little bit?
People from Palestine, United States Army helped, officers of Jewish origin, but it was all above board with orders. We ran the displaced person camps. We administered them. The volunteers, you could use the word smuggle, or got through the British blockade and got them into. But without being facetious, I was one of the few who could relate, not only by language, but by experience, with the people, former inmates who are now in displaced person camps. There were hundreds of them. It was an enormous task of feeding them, of taking care of them, of sorting them, of interviewing them. Nazis tried to get into the DP camps. Nazis tattooed themselves with numbers and all that stuff. So I fulfilled a very useful task. I was one of them. They trusted me, because you could not trust anyone who legitimately, we knew who was in a camp and who wasn't. And I did that work till 1947. And then I came to America.
Were you discharged?
Eventually I even got married.
Were you?
We have 2 children.
Would you tell me your wife's name?
Sure, Beatrice S. Lehman.
What was her maiden name?
Silasberg. Very famous family. Russia. Her grandfather wrote 4 or 5 major books on pre-revolutionary Russian government. He was either 1 or 2 I think 2 Jews were in the Russian Duma, and he was one of them, member of the parliament after 1905.
Where did you meet her?
I met her at the University of Wisconsin. And we have 2 children.
And their names?
Julie is in Chicago, and my son Paul is now at Harvard Business School. Just finished the first semester.
Are either of them married?
No, not yet. No grandchildren. They'll come.
Couple other things just to kind of complete the picture. Were you discharged from the Army before you came to the U.S., or did you come with the military?
I was discharged twice. Yeah, because I was in the service twice, always in intelligent capacity. OSS, then counterintelligence corps, then military intelligence.
Why did you go to Wisconsin? Or was that your place?
The first battalion that I was in was a Wisconsin National Guard division.
In Europe? Europe?
Yes, in Europe. And I made lasting friends. They were wonderful people. They truly, honestly adopted me. I mean, there was Terry. They called me Terry after Terry and the Pirates and all that stuff. So I knew them, and I came to Wisconsin, a little town, Port Washington, 4,000 people. Then I went to Milwaukee, went to school. Then I had to go to Madison, Wisconsin, because Milwaukee was only a 2-year college. You had to finish in Wisconsin. Got a master's degree, went to Army Language School in Monterey, perfected my Russian. Went to Europe, did some interesting stuff. Came back, went to Columbia University, became a Russian scholar, a Sovietologist. Went to Wall Street with Perestroika and Glasnost. They couldn't have Perestroika without investment capital, so I became one of the first investment bankers, so-called, in Russia, and I loved it. I really liked the Russians. If it wasn't for the Russians, as well as the Americans, but primarily the Russians, who lost 20 million people at the front, probably more, I wouldn't be sitting here either. And what else can I tell you? This tape should run out within 3-4 minutes, yes?
5
minutes?
Can I just...
You still want to drag?
I have a couple more questions.
For 5 more minutes.
Did you finish telling all the Krupp trial? You did testify at the Krupp trial.
I have.
Just
Right.
you did testify. What city was
Not
in?
at the Krupp trial.
Oh,
At the trial of the Hauptkapo. The Krupp trial, the testimony that I gave was for the lawsuit against the firm using slave labor, which resulted in a settlement of 10 million Deutschmarks. This is how we got the H50. And I think that because of these various inquiries and documents about Krupp, and it finally got to the Shoah Foundation, and finally got to Ferenc, and finally got to Manchester, kind of temptation follows you through life. I don't want to be flippant about it. It's a horrible story. Truly, honestly, it's a horrible story. But I told you so much already.
have you been interviewed for any other project before?
No. Yes?
Were you interviewed? I thought you said in our pre-interview you had mentioned that you were interviewed for a German television.
Ah, yes. Yes, you're absolutely correct. You have a better memory than I do. But events that only I know happened. 83, 84, a journalist, a woman, quite famous, I understand, in Germany, came to do a interview on the role of German industrialists during the war, and interviewed me like you did about Fifth Tyson. The interview was in English and German, I believe. And I am told by many people that it was an interview shown all over German television, but I have no transcript. I didn't ask for any, but people told me that they saw me on television, so that was an interview similar to this one.
We just have to end up on the next tape with just a few of these things to show on the camera. So we will continue on the next tape, okay?
If you insist. Now you have.
How do you think your experiences during the war affected the way you raised your children?
They affected it negatively, without a doubt. No person who goes through something like that can bring back, can positively add to normal human behavior. The Germans have marked us all, not just by a tattoo, positively and possibly. If I suffered, they suffered. My children are very perceptive, very smart, very intelligent. They feel it. No doubt about it. They didn't do this. I don't think that any one of us, to this day, is unmarked by the experience. Cannot be. I don't know how we are affected, but certainly not positively. I could live without it. Trust me.
Do you have any long-term effects, either physically or emotionally, from the...
No, certainly not. Me? Impossible.
Any health problems associated with your experiences? Do you have dreams or nightmares?
Nightmares.
Are you affiliated with any Holocaust organizations?
No. But unfortunately, since there's so few of us left, I'm kind of slowly being dragged into it, not by you or by anybody else, but myself, kind of becoming a last Mohican of the survivors. So I'll write some more.
What would you say to those who said the Holocaust never happened?
Oh, I wouldn't even honor them with an answer. That's a silly thing. I mean, all the documents are in Germany. There's a society in England It meets on a regular basis. It's called the Flat Earth Society.
Looking back over the past 50-some years at what you experienced, what message would you leave for your children, your grandchildren, or future generations?
What message can you leave? Don't have a Holocaust? Don't have ethnic cleansing? I was always against apartheid. I was appalled by the fact that the American army was segregated during the Second World War. I was probably the only white man in America, or very few of the white men in America, who thought when they started to burn down the ghettos, they were absolutely correct. Burn the damn thing down. How do you, it doesn't take a survivor to leave this kind of a message. But the world hasn't learned much. It doesn't have to be against the Jews. Cambodians aren't Jewish. Pot Paul did a good job. Stalin didn't do such a bad job either, though entirely different. He truly, honestly used the labor. I don't condone it, I don't press it, but I don't have a message. I think the story is the message. No, nothing more should be added.
Is there anything I forgot to ask you or anything you'd like to add?
Good luck to you. I wish you all the luck in the world.
And good luck to you, and thank you so much for participating in the project.
Thank you. Bye.
The camera's showing your arm. Would you tell me your number again, please?
139.996. 139.996. Would you like to hear it in SS German? Häftling 139.996. Meldet sich gehorsam. Reports with respect.
And would you explain about this document?
This is a very interesting document which you dug up. I'm referring to my interviewer, and comes from a book which lists the arrival of various transport from various ghettos to Auschwitz, including the transport from Zawiercie and the numbers which the concentration camp inmates received. I don't know where the cover page for this is.
Mic in the right position.
This is the front page of a book that I mentioned in the testimony in my interview with you. It was written by Ferenc. The book is called Less Than Slaves. It deals with German industrialists and has particular sections devoted to Krupp. Ferenc was Director General of United Restitution Organization. He was one of the trial lawyers at Nuremberg. He was the man responsible for the lawsuit, primarily responsible for the lawsuit against Krupp, where we received the 10 million Deutschmarks. And the title, Less Than Slaves, is taken from my testimony against Krupp. If you turn the page you will see the direct quote on the next page. This is a phrase lifted out of my testimony, which described the conditions in Fünftaischen rather well, which I read to you during the taping.
Do you see any of the people or the others who might have testified in the Krupp case? Do you see any of those survivors nowadays?
No, I do not.
Describe this, please.
This is the title page of a book written by William Manchester, The Arms of Krupp. He interviewed me, and there are a number of pages dedicated to Fünftaischen, as well as other Krupp enterprises, and of course the whole history of the House of Krupp, from the beginning to literally the publication date of the book. It described pretty much what I told you before.
Because of my coughing, would you please explain what this is again?
This is the cover page of a book written by William Manchester. It deals with the history of Krupp, extensively with the wartime factories, including Fünftaischen as well as other factories. And since I was interviewed, he deals with my father, my uncle, and my time in Fünftaischen. And his interview was probably based on a testimony that I gave in connection with Ferenc's lawsuit against Krupp.
And this? What is this?
This is the cover page of a letter which I received, I mentioned while we were taping, in 1972 from German authorities investigating crimes during the Nazi period. This is the first page, and the next one will show the second page. This is the second page of the same document with Prosecutor Bratker's name and stamp.